Hi, I'm Ben. I'm a final year maths PhD student at Imperial College. I specialize in Riemannian geometry and probability theory. It was a decision process rather than a single moment, but in hindsight, maths was something I naturally converged to in the end. It was my favorite subject in elementary school, and I developed a broad interest in natural sciences later on in grammar school. Then I realized that what I really enjoyed the most about natural sciences was the formal description by mathematics and mathematical formalism. Now, I had some doubts about studying maths at university as opposed to programs which are perceived as more practical, such as engineering or economics, but which also have some mathematical component in them. I concluded that if I were to spend 4 years or more of my life studying a subject, it better be something that I'm really passionate about. So I chose maths. I did well in my undergraduate degree, and I really enjoyed working on my master's thesis. And so I decided that I would pursue a PhD, which is what I'm doing now. I think that's a very romantic idea, but it's in practice not like that. I think the reason I like maths is because I'm inclined towards knowledge which is well structured and has precise definitions, comes in concrete blocks of knowledge. And I think that describes maths really well. I like the mathematical formalism of defining your objects, then taking these clearly defined objects and combining them, and repeating this process. Riemannian geometry is the study of smooth curved surfaces equipped with a distance structure, and probability theory is the study of randomness, in particular of stochastic processes such as random walks. In my research, I study a notion of curvature that's defined by transport distances of certain probability distributions on the surface, or equivalently, by the rate of convergence of random walk on the surface to its invariant distribution. What I think is the most interesting feature of this approach to curvature is that one can also transport probability distributions on a strictly discrete space, such as a graph. And so in this way, we can make sense of curvature of a graph. And this is where discrete geometry enters the picture. In the first year of my PhD program, I took a range of courses in various fields to explore potential research ideas. This was part of the first year of the Mathematics of Random Systems Centre for Doctoral Training, jointly run by Oxford University and Imperial College London. The biggest challenge I faced as a PhD student was to discover a topic I would be interested in studying for the duration of my PhD and formulating good research problems related to the field. This entailed reading a lot of papers and filling in relevant knowledge I didn't acquire during undergraduate studies. In my case, it was catching up with Riemannian geometry and deepening my knowledge of probability theory. I can shortly outline my personal approach to tutoring maths. In the beginning of every lesson, I try to establish students' current understanding by asking probing questions on the material. When I notice some gaps in understanding, I guide my students to state definitions of theorems precisely and then ask them for qualitative interpretations, which is important for building their intuitions about the subject. Sometimes we go through proofs of theorems if they contain important techniques. Oftentimes I found that it's the case that students just missed the train early in the course and didn't properly learn some basic definitions. And so just going through them helps a great deal already. When we have the theory pinned down, we look at problems to deepen understanding. And in this way, we iterate between theory and problem solving as we proceed through the material. A good example would be introductory topology that I was tutoring some time ago. Topology can come across as a fairly abstract subject on a first encounter. Topology is a minimum structure that needs to be imposed on two sets to be able to define continuity of a function between them. The approach I took was to start from spaces with lots of familiar structure and abstract away. We would first talk about inner product spaces, then non-vector spaces, metric spaces, and finally topological spaces, gradually reducing the structure imposed on the set. In this way, my student could rebuild her intuition in each step on the way. I will give a very boring advice on this because there are no tricks or shortcuts here. Start preparing regularly half a year ahead for these exams with a daily practice on past problems. I think these exams are really well designed to test general problem-solving capabilities, especially STEP. Now, the issue is that mathematical problem-solving is a very complex skill, and learning it, just like any other complex skill, is also a biological process which happens over the span of months, if not years. This cannot be compensated for by just putting in enough hours, which is also important, but in my opinion, not as important as consistent long-term spaced practice. I've had a lot of such moments, and I experience them regularly as a tutor. Having a direct impact on my students' success has been a truly meaningful experience for me. There have been distinguished moments when my students broke their preconceived barriers to understanding, usually because they suddenly see how the bits fall into place. But it's by far the most satisfying to see my students grow mathematically in the long run and achieve their academic goals. For prospective or new undergraduates, I'd recommend Kevin Houston's book, How to Think Like a Mathematician. I think this book provides a good idea of what doing university math entails. For students who want to get a head start, a good introduction to analysis would be Stephen Abbott's Understanding Analysis, and for algebra, I'd recommend Joseph Rodman's Abstract Algebra. With sufficient time and support, I believe anybody with university maths foundation can learn these difficult subjects, perhaps with the assistance of an expert tutor. My approach would be to establish the student's current understanding, filling in definitions and TINET results, perhaps covering a few important proofs. I often find that the reason for not understanding is that students don't know their definitions accurately. In maths, it's important to build understanding from the bottom up, and you cannot leave out certain building blocks. I have assisted panicking students before exams on numerous occasions, but fundamentally in these cases the approach is the same as I have described before, with an extra focus on past exam papers. But again, I want to emphasize that timely preparation is essential really, because a course in real analysis, let's say, cannot be covered within a few hours, a few days before the exam. First, don't hesitate out of concern for future employability. Maths will provide you with the best foundation for lifelong learning in all other technical fields. For example, if you decide to become a programmer or work in finance later on. On the other hand, students should know that university maths is a lot about learning definitions, theorems, and writing careful proofs, as well as problem solving. Therefore, students who are not so much detail-oriented might find this tedious and not have a good time. Yes, there are plenty of misconceptions, typically stemming from the stereotypical idea that maths is not practical and it's difficult to find a job with a maths degree afterwards. But I see it differently. Maths is a universal skill that will always be valued, even more so these days when the job landscape is changing rapidly because of AI and machine learning. Good foundation in maths makes it much easier to specialize in any other technical field. Maths is the backbone of physics, computer science, and engineering, and as such is indispensable for any degree of understanding of these fields. Pure maths is a bit peculiar because it seeks to further mathematical knowledge for the sake of maths itself, often regardless of any potential applications. Nonetheless, in my own area of research, I'm not entirely on the abstract side, and my research has applications in biology and computer science, which is a motivating factor for me. Parents can try identifying their children's interest early on and then look for exposure, for example, by finding a maths interest club or finding an experienced tutor that could introduce their children to advanced topics